Incredible ancient discoveries from around the world. Trajans Baths were once the largest bath and leisure complex in ancient Rome. Thanks to old records, we know construction was completed under Emperor Trajan in July of 109 AD. Although it had started 13 years earlier during Emperor Domitian's reign, the architect is believed to have been the famous Apollodorus of Damascus. Once completed, the baths were used continuously until the early 5th century. At some point after that, people began dismantling the baths piece by piece to reuse the marble and bricks in other building projects. The remains of the baths have looked the same since the 16th century. Over the years, many famous artworks have been found at the site, including a well-known sculpture. Archaeologists also discovered a 12,000-year-old mural carved into solid rock. The wall is about 20 meters wide and 5 meters tall and shows human figures alongside tall, slim beings with elongated heads and large eyes. The mural was found in an underground chamber by a team led by archaeologist Alexei Morozov. The tunnels appeared artificially made and strange symbols covered the walls. After months of analysis, experts suggested that the carvings represent a timeline of human history and possibly show early humans interacting with mysterious beings that seemed to pass on knowledge through geometric symbols and celestial images. Even more intriguing, the rock's chemical composition revealed a mineral unknown in the region, sparking speculation that it might be of extraterrestrial origin. The area was sealed off to prevent looting, while archaeologists debated whether the mural proves alien contact or just reflects ancient myths. Either way, the 12,000-year-old artwork challenges our understanding of human history. Speaking of amazing Roman discoveries, let's talk about Cryptoporticus Neapolitanus, an underground Roman road tunnel built near Naples in 37 BC. It's over 2,100 feet long and was designed to connect Naples to the town of Puteoli and the Phlegrean fields. Before the tunnel, a massive swamp separated Naples and Puteoli, making travel between them dangerous and time-consuming. Architect Lucius Cocceius Octus was hired for the project, and he did such a great job that the tunnel remained in use up to the 20th century, thanks to many rounds of restoration. During World War II, it even served as a bomb shelter. It was finally closed as a road tunnel in the 1950s after a landslide, but it was later restored and reopened as a historical site. Another artifact you might have seen in the news recently is a very unusual ancient Egyptian coffin. In January 2023, it was returned to Cairo from the United States after a campaign to bring it back. What's strange about it is the painted image of the person on the lid. It's green. We also know who the coffin belonged to, a male priest named Ankh-en-Mut, and it dates back over 2,300 years to the late dynastic period. The coffin was illegally smuggled out of a tomb in Abu Sir years ago, sold to buyers in Germany, and eventually ended up in Houston's Museum of Natural Science in 2013. There's no indication the museum knew it had been looted, but giving it up wasn't easy. The coffin is estimated. In April 2022, workers in a quarry in Kent, England made an unbelievable discovery while doing their regular work. A massive 16th century shipwreck buried more than 1,000 feet underground. It was such a surprise that the BBC made a documentary about it. The ship, now known as the Dungeon Ship, hasn't been fully identified yet, but about 100 pieces of its wooden structure survive. It's believed to have been about 80 feet long when it was whole. Tree ring dating of the oak wood used in the ship showed it was cut between 1558 and 1580, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. The quarry has been in use since the 1940s, so it's shocking that the ship stayed hidden for so long. Few ships from that period survive, making this a priceless archaeological find. In Izanoy, an ancient city in Turkey, excavations have been going on for years. In December 2022, archaeologists there hit gold, figuratively, when they found severed stone heads of several Greek gods. They identified the heads of Eros, Dionysus, Hercules, and several other deities. Because they're made of stone, it's hard to date them exactly, but they probably come from around the 3rd century AD, when most of Aizanoi's monumental buildings were constructed under Roman rule. Oddly enough, the heads were found without the bodies, and the decapitation seems intentional. Taos Pueblo in New Mexico has been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years, yet very few Americans even know it exists. It's the only Native American community that's both a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a United States National Historic Landmark. Despite these honors, much of its history remains unknown. The Taos people keep an oral tradition but don't share it with outsiders. Only about 150 residents remain. What looks like a crumbling old building is actually a cluster of connected homes made of adobe, with no windows or doors, just walls. The outer walls need to be constantly reinforced with new layers of earth. Visitors can enter some areas for a fee, but most of the Pueblo remains off limits. If the last residents choose not to share their secrets, the true story of Taos Pueblo could vanish forever. On Tinian Island in the northern Mariana Islands, there's a place called the House of Targa. But it's not really a house. It's a space where a house once stood, supported by giant stone pillars, some of which are still standing. These stones, up to 15 feet tall, are topped with round caps that once supported a huge wooden home. Built possibly as far back as the Neolithic period, the raised home protected the inhabitants from floods and wild animals. A local legend says a giant named Targa picked up the stones himself to build the house and impress a woman he loved from a nearby island. Whether that's true or not, no one knows. The house was likely destroyed by an earthquake centuries ago, leaving only the stones behind. Lastly, let's talk about a place with a magical sounding name, the Witch's Hat. But it's actually a real archaeological site in an English village. The origins are mysterious, but the most accepted theory is that it was built by a herding community over 5,600 years ago, shortly after farming was introduced to early Britons by European settlers. This kind of structure is rare and mostly found in southwest England, in a style called Cotswold 7. Archaeologists believe it was built in 2 phases, first as a wooden chamber and then rebuilt with stone about 100 years later. The strange name comes from an 18th century legend. If a horse needed new horseshoes, you could tie it up near the witch's hat, leave a bit of money, and by morning the money would be gone and the horse would be shod. If not, the horse might die. The origin of this story is just as mysterious as the wooden circle itself. For hundreds of years, no one even knew that this Bronze Age timber circle existed in Norfolk, England. The site was called Seahenge, although that name was actually made up by the British press and might not be completely accurate. There's no real evidence it was a henge, but what we do know for sure is that it was man-made. It was first discovered in 1998 after shifting sands on a beach called Home near the town of King's Lynn revealed what was left of the circle, along with an upside-down tree stump in its centre. The oak posts, which stood about 10 feet tall, were dated to be nearly 4,000 years old. Back then, the land was a salt marsh, and the tides would have quickly destroyed the wood if it was left there. So the entire circle was dug up and moved to the Lynn Museum, where it's now on display for the public. Historians' best guess is that it was some sort of burial site. But to be honest, that's the usual explanation when they're not quite sure what something was for. It might have been a ritual space, a kind of calendar, or who knows what else. Now let's talk about something we can all relate to: customer service. Whether you're working in it or dealing with it, it can be a frustrating experience. People working in customer service are often overwhelmed by complaints, and customers are often upset about the quality of the service they get. But surprisingly, this isn't just a modern problem. It's been going on for at least 4,000 years. One of the world's oldest known customer complaints was found on a clay tablet from Mesopotamia in an ancient city in Iraq. It was written by a man named Nani, directed at a merchant named Ea Nasir. Apparently, Nazca sold Nani some low-quality copper ingots and then refused to give him a refund. So Nani wrote this angry message and even said he was planning to visit in person to settle the issue. Basically, a 4,000-year-old threat. The complaint was written in cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems used in the ancient Middle East. We still don't know if Nani ever got his money back, but we can imagine how annoying. Think standing in line is just a modern annoyance? Think again? A fossil discovery proves that lining up has existed since ancient times and not just for humans. This fossil shows a line of trilobites, sea creatures that lived around 480 million years ago, frozen in place as they followed their leader in a straight line. They were buried during an underwater mudslide off the coast of Morocco, and the sudden event preserved their positions. Trilobites were blind, so they probably used their spiny bumps to stay in touch with each other and stay on the right path. The fossil is one of the oldest known examples of group behavior ever found on Earth. Since trilobites went extinct over 250 million years ago, it's hard to say anything with certainty, but finding their remains together in groups suggests they lived socially and cooperatively, not alone. Kind of like modern lobsters that migrate in groups today. So yes, creatures were patiently lining up almost since life began on Earth. Moving on to Peru, Nazca Desert is famous for its mysterious geoglyphs known as the Nazca lines. Ancient designs carved into the desert floor by unknown people thousands of years ago. But it turns out those aren't the only desert artworks out there. Thanks to drone technology, archaeologists recently discovered 50 new shapes and figures in the Pueblo region of Nazca. Some of them are so eroded they're nearly invisible to the naked eye, and would have stayed that way if not for new aerial imaging tools. Some of these new drawings look like human-monster hybrids. And archaeologists believe they weren't made by the Nazca people, but by the Topara and Paracas cultures, who lived in the area around 2,500 years ago. We still know very little about the Topara and how or if they're connected to the Paracas or Nazca civilizations. Maybe these newly uncovered images will help us figure that out. And finally, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell,